Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk right here on Geekscape. I'm Christian Bladt of Marvel Movie Talk and, of course, the Blackcast. Very excited to be talking about one of my favorite topics, the X-Men. And I'm joined by Jeffrey Brown, who has a new book that is called Days of Future Fun. And very excited to get to chat with Jeffrey Brown. Jeffrey, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I have two kids. My son is 9 and my daughter's 7. So I have read your books many times aloud. And I think that you're in heavy rotation with like Sandra Boynton and Karen Katz. Darth Vader and Son in particular was one. And it's interesting because it's very fun. It's cute for Star Wars fans. Was there ever any question about Darth Vader and Son of like, this kind of gives away the biggest secret of the Star Wars universe that Darth Vader is Luke's dad?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's strange because it, on the one hand, it is kind of like a spoiler, but I feel like in the cultural landscape, it's kind of a known thing for the most part. And oddly, I hear from people who like, they've been reading the book with their kid. They've been reading Darth Vader and Son and Vader's Little Princess. And then their kids watch Empire Strikes Back for the first time. And they get to that moment where, Vader's like, I am your father. Like, and the kids are like, what? Well, and they had no idea. And so it's weird that, in a weird way, it's like, it is a spoiler, but then like, it's also somehow doesn't not spoil things.
Right. No, it's like, actually, it's like you put it right in front of your face and you almost don't see it. I had the same thing happen with my son when he watched Empire Strikes Back. I'm kind of, sitting back, waiting. All right, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? And he was legitimately surprised. And I think that goes a long way. My son, I showed him the original Star Wars when he was 6 because, I didn't want to push. You don't want to push any of this stuff on because then they're not going to like it. And he wasn't sure if he was ready for it, but he has an interest in the Amazon, and not the company that ships books, the actual river. And so he really wanted to see the Jungle Cruise movie. And when I saw that with him, I'm like, okay, this has like so many. Well, first of all, it wasn't particularly good, but that's not the point. There was like so much like scary stuff. The face melting was like worse than in Raiders of the Lost Ark. All right, I think this kid might be ready for more than he thinks he is. But he was also at a summer camp, and the first week was like, well, this is Star Wars week, and we're going to watch Star Wars on Saturday on Friday. And I'm like, oh no, that's not the way he's going to see it for the first time. So I picked him up early, and I'm like, we're watching it now because you're watching it with me.
Yeah.
So and it's interesting because I was 7 when Return of the Jedi came out. So even by then, I had seen these movies many times. My daughter's 7, and she gets scared at like the Paw Patrol movie. Wild Robot she loved, but she definitely jumped in mommy's lap for half of that movie, So it's I don't know. Kids are all different, and kids, especially kids today compared to what, we would have seen when we were kids by the time we were 7, which might not even be a good thing, Jeffrey.
Yeah. And I mean, so I have 2 sons, and my older son, I'm really glad because I finally have someone to watch horror movies with. And then my younger son, on the other hand, there's things that I think like, oh, that's gonna freak him out, and he's fine with it. But then other things that he's definitely not into horror. I made the mistake of watching The Force Awakens with him too early, and the scene with the Rathtars just scarred him. so he's never gone back to that. But yeah, it's like kids are funny, and they kind of know what they can take and what they can't, but
right. And as I said, it's always the key is like not to push it too much, and interesting thing about, watching horror with your older son, is it a situation where it's like, all right, it's December. You and I are going to watch Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I guess your brother can watch Muppet Christmas Carol downstairs.
I mean, essentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Muppet Christmas Carol also.
So am I.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, they're both they're both great films, but they're not for the same audience. And yeah, so I think that it's interesting. I would say both Christmas classics, but proceed with caution. So when you have a book like the X-Men Days of Future Fun, it's very clear that there is an affinity for these characters, much as I have, and we'll kind of go through some of the particulars and some fun appearances from characters that people might not realize are in here. But when do you first come across the X-Men? Is it on screen? Is it in comics? When do you first see them?
I mean, so I grew up with two older brothers, and we would all get comics. And it got to the point where I don't know how old I was, but I had my own money for like the first time, and we were at the grocery store, and there's a little spinner rack, and I don't think I'd actually read any X-Men comics before, but I'd seen the covers and thought they were cool, and I had like $1.50, and back then single issues were 65 cents.
Yep.
And I was like, I can get two comics, but there was X-Men 193 was out, and which was a double-sized
issue. Yeah.
And it was like,
because I want to flex my nerd know-how. That's the first in continuity appearance of Firestar. Because she had only appeared as the tie-in to the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends series. So it's the first time she shows up as one of the Hellions.
Yeah, and it's got this like action-packed wraparound cover, and like it's like full of Wolverine, clawing everyone. But I was like, but if I get that one, I can only get one comic, and I ended up getting, I think it was an issue of Spider-Man. And then X-Men 192 was also on the rack, which is not, it's not like Wolverine shows up at the very end in a couple panels basically, and just looking at stuff talking, and it's mostly Rogue, Colossus, and Nightcrawler are the thrust of the story, and it's so it's kind of a weird issue, but I knew I wanted an X-Men comic, and I read that, and I was like, oh, I like the X-Men. It was like just so different and made such an impression on me.
Right. So the issue you didn't get is the one that I'm sharing on screen for a visual audience. And I actually forgot that at that point, a double issue was $1.25. I thought they were still $1. But you were like, I'm going to use all my money on one comic. I think I need to proceed with more caution. Interestingly, I've had the great pleasure to interview Chris Claremont a number of times. I probably talked to him for, I don't know, I think it adds up to more than 12 hours. But I'll tell you, Jeffrey, that's only like 6 interviews, because you'll talk to him and, he just goes places that you're never expecting. And I mentioned to him that the first issue I read is one that I'm showing right here, which is Uncanny X-Men 176. And I tried to make the case, this was my mistake, I tried to make the case to Chris Claremont that this was a terrible first issue, but I loved it anyway. And he's like, no, any issue would be a good first issue. I'm like, all right, I guess you have to say that. That's like saying, which one of your children is the ugliest, Mr. Claremont. But it's so in this issue, Scott is on his honeymoon with Madeline Pryor, long before she's a clone of Jean Grey. She's just some lady who happens to look like Jean, and he fights a squid. And there's one page where there's an ongoing storyline where Kitty ends up being abducted by the Morlocks, and Wolverine's kind of on the trail. And I'm like, that one page, I'm like, well, I kind of want to know what else is going on here. So there's something about these characters that they're very captivating, and they just kind of grab you. And I had seen them. There's 2 episodes of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends that had the X-Men on it. And it's always fun to point out that in that series, Wolverine has an Australian accent for reasons unbeknownst to any of us. Yeah. And then, of course, they cast an Australian guy to play him in the movie, but he does an American accent. So, somehow, I don't know. I don't believe that we're all in a matrix and this is all a simulation, Jeffrey, but every once in a while you see something we're like, well, that doesn't really add up. So so you check out 192, which I know has sort of like the warlock characters, the technovirus characters on there. I can't remember the name of them. So at some point you're like, okay, this is great. Spider-Man's great. Which is exactly what I grew up with was Spider-Man, X-Men, and the Star Wars, the monthly Marvel Star Wars series. Those were the first ones that I started getting. I also had an older brother. He's 5 years older than me. So it was a lot of like, you get this one, I'll get that one. And we shared. And sadly, we didn't bag and board hardly anything back then, Jeffrey.
Well, my brothers did not. My brothers did not share. It was like a special occasion for me to like have my oldest brother let me read one of his comics. And I remember as I got older, I got the brave enough to sneak in and like read some stuff when he wasn't home.
Right. Yeah. There was the trick I would do, which is I would take like just a regular magazine and put the comic book inside of it. So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to get any smudges on anything, which actually prepared me to be a more serious collector in my early teens. So obviously, tremendous characters here that just kind of grab you. Was there a favorite of yours as a kid, and has that sort of favorite character evolved over time, or is it still one tried and true for you?
I mean, it's still Wolverine is still my favorite, but like I really like Storm, and I like Nightcrawler and Colossus. I think the other thing is it's not even so much just the characters, it's the relationships. And I think that's one of the reasons that 192 grabbed me, was because it set up these dynamics between Rogue and Nightcrawler and Colossus, and you kind of start getting hints of like these relationships are more complex than we're just teammates and with the same goals. And so it's like I'm not a particularly big Cyclops fan, but I think Cyclops is one of the reasons that I like Storm and Wolverine so much. Like with Storm, it's their kind of their battle for leadership that happens, and with Wolverine, it's like Cyclops is kind of this foil in terms of character to Wolverine. So, but yeah, Wolverine is still probably like my go-to.
Yeah, he was always who I identified with, and it was very hard to catch up on back issues of Uncanny X-Men because of the price tags attached to them.
Yeah,
so when they started the classic X-Men series, I was starting to get to read these earliest stories of him and watching sort of the character evolve. And so I was always a Wolverine fan. From the time that I started reading, the character that I think I identified with was Kitty, because even though, I don't know, she was 13 and a half or 14, I forget exactly how old she was when I started reading, you're like, oh, this is a kid in this situation. And so I always had a strong connection with Kitty for me. And the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries where they go to Japan is a favorite, and I got to talk to Al Milgrom earlier, late last year. I ran into him at Comic-Con, and he was more than happy to come on the show. So yeah, I think there's something about Wolverine which is interesting, because I mean, kids love that character, and he's of course the literally the most bloodthirsty and violent character in the book, more so than most of the villains, except for probably Sabretooth. So it's interesting because they find a way to make him work, in the animated series from the 90s. It's a lot like the Ninja Turtles, where it's like you can use blades if it's a robot, but you can't stab anyone. You can cut a thing and knock it over, but you're not going to do the trick where he puts puts his fist under somebody's head and he puts the claws on the outside and threatens them with the third claw through their brain. None of that stuff's good for kids. But so obviously, I think that it's fun to see these characters adapted to the Days of Future Fun book. And I love the selection of characters you have here because it is kind of the idealized X-Men for me, right before the Mutant Massacre, when they
Yeah.
started, before anybody leaves for X Factor or Excalibur, Kitty's healthy, Nightcrawler's healthy. And you have Storm with the Mohawk haircut, which I always say is the Storm. Yeah. That's my Storm. You know,
I mean, it's easily the coolest looking Storm.
I respect all eras of Storm, as they say, Jeffrey, but that one is my favorite. And you've got Jean Grey as the Phoenix, which to me is one of the greatest costumes of all time. Is the green and then the red. The Dave Cockrum did a tremendous job on the design of the Phoenix costume, and it's such a great costume that even in modern times, they always try to come up with like, oh, what if we put her the Marvel Girl pointy mask and the skirt? You know, it just always comes back to this one though, because it's like, no, this is the coolest one. Why are you not using this? You know?
Yeah, that was one of the, like I knew I wanted to include her, and I tried sketching with the Marvel Girl costume, and after the first 2 sketches with that costume, I was like, nope, that's not right. And I wanted to I'm not going to get into the death of Jean Grey or anything in the book, but I knew like I was like, that's the costume. I want to have the flaming Phoenix in there is just fun to draw. So
yeah, the Phoenix iteration of that character is obviously the most iconic, and it's the most rich, it's the most engaging, to the extent that after she is basically resurrected, they come up with what I thought was a pretty clever workaround. Like, no, that's the Phoenix that died. This is Jean's body. She's not the Phoenix. And then we find out later, she's kind of the Phoenix. Is that they never are able to come up with a new like superhero code name for her. So her superhero code name is just Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Like in the opening of the animated series, it's Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, because it's like, that's really who she is,
Yeah.
And so I was excited to see her on the cover of Days of Future Fun, and talk a little bit about, just sort of going through and deciding some of the situations that you want to put them in. And I think for people that aren't familiar with this book and maybe the Darth Vader books, it's a lot of 1 or 2 pages collection of vignettes, I guess is the best way to characterize them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a system of where I'm thinking of situations that kids might be in, and then looking to the source material to see, like, is there an issue of X-Men that would fit with this? So like if they're playing tag, like what would work with that? And then sometimes it's just like characters or situations, like scenes from the comic. So like the back cover is actually a reference to the X-Men Alpha Flight comic where Wolverine comes back and he's like, you don't want to see what's in my head right now. Don't read my mind. Like he's all bloody and beaten and he's just killed a million things. And then like, so my take is, of course, like he's, like what's really going on in his head is just imagining that he's riding a unicorn through flowers and rainbows.
Which I feel like, Logan probably does have those moments, where it's like, if only this could be me. Think about how great it would be.
Well, it's, it also plays to like, he's got to have, he's maintaining his tough exterior and like, part of what makes Wolverine work is like, he is bloodthirsty, but he's got like a soft heart inside. And so like, I think like this, it's kind of a way to reference that. So yeah, it's just like, so I reread the comics, and anytime something jumped out at me, like I couldn't always find like the right idea to go with something. So I really wanted to do something with Mojo, but like couldn't figure out the right idea that fit.
Well, and how do you portray Mojo in a way where he's not terrifying to look at? It's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a way, like it's, like the one thing that I do in books like this, or like the Vader books, is you give the kids more power. And I think somehow that kind kind of changes the dynamic. So with Mojo is like, he was trying to, the one idea I came up with was he was trying to enlist all the X-Men for his reality show, and they're like not happy with the contracts, and so they're just arguing about the contracts. But
that sounds about right. I think that they really nailed Mojo on the animated series. You know, they played up the showbiz angle that he's, you know, the director, the producer, the studio head, you know, the censor, he's everything. And yeah, I think that that's a character that as a kid, I don't, because, you know, he shows up in Long Shots miniseries, beautiful miniseries by Anna Sente and Art Adams. And I don't think I understood that, like, oh, if you were in a room with this guy, you would probably be screaming the whole time, just the way that, you know, his eyes are propped open and he's, you know, he's in that sort of like wheelchair. I wanted to backtrack to what you said about Wolverine, because I think it's really important for the definition of the character. And I think many creators, comic, TV, movie, have latched onto the fact that he has this sort of great relationship with younger teammates. So Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, Jubilee and Wolverine, and, you know, in later iterations, X-23 in the Logan film. And I always isolate what I feel like is the best single standalone issue, just a one-off, is Uncanny X-Men 205, which is Wounded Wolf, where he's out in the snow, and he's assisted by the character codename is Energizer, Katie Power from Power Pack. And it's such a random, like, oh, she just happened to be there. And, you know, it's always interesting because when you're X-Men, you're like, oh, any character that I want to show up for a couple episodes or a couple issues, excuse me, you know, like Spider-Man shows up whenever it suits him, you know? And I think that to me, that's such a telling thing, because that's Logan at his most vulnerable and most wounded, and a 5 or 6 year old little girl is doing her best to help him, you know? And that I think is a layer to the character that, you know, when he's introduced in the Incredible Hulk, when we first see him in Giant Size X-Men, there's no way anybody, you only get to that point with that character after years of exploring his psyche. And, you know, I think that's the gift of having someone who wrote him for 17 years and then, of course, comes back and writes periodically. But he really got to turn that character into someone that is so well defined. And, you know, in the movies, they sort of have that dynamic with Rogue, because Rogue is so much younger in the live action films. So, yeah, I think that it's a great balance to, you know, him during the Dark Phoenix saga underneath the Hellfire Club, you know, in the sewers and just slicing up goons as he goes through, you know. I think that's why a character like that really works, you know, because you get such a wide canvas to paint on. I wanted to talk about what I thought was fun. You know, I alluded to a little while ago that characters that I wasn't expecting to be in here. You have a couple pages where they're babysitting the New Mutants, which was another series that I loved. I think there's some tremendous characters on there. Was that something you had at the outset? Like, oh, I want to try and get the New Mutants in here.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to, like, and it was like pretty immediate. Like, I knew I wanted to do like X-Men babysitting the New Mutants, and like, of course, like the New Mutants like using all their powers, and the X-Men like trying to like you know, keep them in line. And so I mean, I wouldn't say I was as dedicated a New Mutants fan as X-Men, but I definitely like liked the reading X-Men and New Mutants back in the day, like kind of seeing like, it's kind of like the X-Men were like a few years ahead of where the New Mutants were, and so you see these parallels, but then they're different people. And but yeah, mostly it was just like, you know, they have lots of fun powers too, and so I knew I wanted to like just to get to draw Cannonball bouncing around a 2-page spread.
That's who I was going to mention, is the idea that like, oh, you have to chase after Cannonball and get him to sit down. That was fun. You have a page with Krakoa, which is is fun to think about was literally a one-off story in 1975, and then they built years of modern storytelling around Krakoa, which is kind of interesting. Was there? So you mentioned Mojo was an example of something you tried to fit in. Was there anybody else that you were like, oh, I really want them in here, but it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like who else. I mean, like Thunderbird or Mystique or
Right.
like there's so many characters, and some of them I just couldn't think of an idea that fit, and then some it just didn't make sense to like fit them in for just one page, and like I managed to do it with Iceman, like and he shows up, but yeah, like I have a whole list of I basically I wrote down every X-Men character and every New Mutants character, and it was like, okay, like, and I was like circling like, here's who I definitely want to find a place for.
You drew a line through the Demon Bear. You're like, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
But I was glad to see Arcade, which
Yeah.
I always thought was a fun character. And obviously, if you have them as children, that lends itself to them.
Yeah.
In sort of the acknowledgments in the book, you thank one of my favorite artists, Art Adams, who of course provided us with the X Babies, which there is definitely a little bit of a feel because you have these X-Men characters as children. Obviously, it's different members of the group, but it reminded me of how much I think I was probably 10 when the X Babies showed up, that I was just like, somehow I'm like, this is such a funny idea. But I guess that was the era of like, Flintstone Kids, Muppet Babies, they were like, let's take everything and make a kid version of them. And Art Adams, I referenced his Long Shot series. He's one of those artists who I guess it would take a while for him to do stuff. So he wasn't really like a monthly artist. He was like, let's do an annual, let's do a special edition, and that sort of thing. And but he was always a favorite of mine. Is there a specific style you were trying to go for? Obviously, your style is consistent with the way you drew in the Darth Vader books, but like, for example, the decision, like, well, let's go with the yellow and black stripe Wolverine. What about the look went into your mind when you were drawing this?
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is whether it's these or the Star Wars books or like Thor and Loki, I'm kind of I have to simplify the costumes a lot of the time. Like it just doesn't make sense to draw every little detail that some of the costumes have, and so just kind of looking through and like seeing like which costumes and what details like make the most sense. And I'd actually originally, like, because the brown and yellow Wolverine was the one that like I grew up drawing all the time. Like my initial sketches were all with that one, and it was actually Disney was like, no, like we want you to do the blue and yellow one, and I was like, okay.
But by the way, I'm of the same mind as you, and John Byrne also of the same mind that the brown is, to me, it's my preferred one. But I of course understand that for the brand purposes, I can see Disney saying like, well, this is the Wolverine that people kind of recognize.
Yeah, and then in the end, like that was the right decision. Like the blue and yellow, I think, fits better with the tone of the book and in terms of like fitting in with like the color schemes of the other costumes. And I still managed, like I drew myself in the brown and yellow costume in the
yes, I did like that
page,
the final page.
I fit it in there a little bit, but
so I thought it was really fun to kind of spend time with these characters, and you had referenced that you had previously done a Thor and Loki book. So this wasn't, but I believe that's the only other Marvel project that you've done as of now, correct?
Yeah, I did do two short stories for the Strange Tales anthology years back.
Okay.
When they did the relaunch of that, I did like a 2-page Fantastic Four story and a 4-page X-Men story. and but it's like neither one of those really like had enough room or space to do like everything I would have liked to do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially if you're getting 4 pages, you're like, all right, let's craft a story that fits into that. But there are definitely limitations, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely fun to see these characters out there. You see, obviously, tons of kids in shirts and backpacks, all these characters that felt really obscure when I was a kid. Like Black Panther is the one who immediately comes to mind, where even people who haven't seen those movies, they know what that suit is. And it's, he was not a top tier character. I mean, he wasn't even really around in the late 80s or the era that you and I are both talking about starting to read, and I think that they've done a tremendous job of the storytelling, because I think you get the brand recognition when you're telling great stories, which ties back into the original Marvel comics. But I think that they've done a great job with these properties. And you mentioned the Fantastic Four. I've got tremendous hopes for the film that'll be coming out this summer, and I hope that they are finally able to get the representation they deserved, because that was such a huge book when I was a kid. I mean, that was the era that John Byrne was writing and drawing it, and just sort of all kinds of next level stuff. It's like, well, what if the Baxter Building went into space, and what if they go back in time and decide whether or not what they're going to do about Nazi Germany, and just really big concept stuff. So the idea that we're going to get the FF. Were they amongst your favorite non-X-Men characters? We talked a little bit about Spider-Man. What were some of the others that you liked as a kid?
Fantastic Four, especially Thing, were like big. I not necessarily a character, but like I loved Secret Wars.
Oh yeah.
And but yeah, it was mostly X-Men and like any X-Men related book, and then Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor. Thor was probably like just behind X-Men, with especially the Walt Simonson run, which was
and I mean, you want to talk about somebody who really was telling unique and different stories. I mean, it's often referenced the fact that he turned Thor into a frog, and it's only 2 issues, but it's it's such a memorable turn of events that it seems really out of left field. Yeah, Secret Wars was going on early on when I was collecting comics, and it was very hard somehow to get all the issues of that. I the one when the Hulk's holding up the mountain. But I was, I talk about this a lot, Jeffrey. I'm a big crossover fan. So when you put characters together, I'm very excited. I love that you had the New Mutants in here. But I mean, I even love stuff like the Flintstones and the Jetsons. I mean, they did a Magnum PI Murder, She Wrote crossover, and I'm just like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. So yeah, I think that the fact that we're getting a Secret Wars film at some point is cause for excitement. And obviously there's multiple series named Secret Wars, and whatever the story is going to be, it doesn't matter, because it's that same concept. So as we start to wind down, are you able to talk about any upcoming projects, or are they under wraps until they're about to be published?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's under wraps, but I can talk about the other book I have coming out later this year in August is a middle grade graphic novel called Hulk Teach. Coming out from Scholastic, and it's basically, the idea was that Hulk is always breaking everything while he's saving the world, and like so they decide that Bruce Banner has to do community service, and they assign him to teach middle school, which of course is just going to make him turn into Hulk all the time. And so
and he's not Smart Hulk, as they call him. Like,
he's not dumb Hulk, but he's not Smart Hulk. It's like I'm almost surprised that they let me kind of do Hulk the way I've done him, because it's a very like squishy, where sometimes Banner knows what Hulk was up to, like when he was Hulk, and sometimes like, and vice versa. But sometimes they like Banner wakes up and he's like, what did Hulk do now? And so I kind of bend the rules to like depending on what I want to happen. But yeah, he's kind of like he's a smart Hulk in some ways, but he's, like he talks, he manages to teach the kids too, when he shows up sometimes, but not like he's not like, it's not like Banner is still in the Hulk's consciousness. And
Yeah, obviously, the Hulk can be a very complicated character to do things with because, sort of at his best, he is the Hulk smash Hulk. But I can see that being difficult for a narrative. I can only imagine someone who like wrote the Hulk comic book for years at a time, and that's why it's like, yeah, but what if he was gray again? Or, what if he was, I'm like, yeah, you want to mix it up a little bit. There's only so much smashing the Hulk can do, Jeffrey,
Yeah.
And, I think that's fun. It's interesting because, I mentioned my younger daughter, she loves it's for preschoolers on Disney Junior. They have a show called Spidey and His Amazing Friends.
Mhm.
And it's all these like very kiddie versions of it. And the Hulk on there is just a lot of like, okay, Spidey, he's like kind of like dumb, but not in the way that we're used to him. He has like a pet rabbit. He doesn't get angry the way that we expect Hulk to. And so watching some of those characters get adapted, it's kind of fun. And, because of that show, my daughter likes the Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel character quite a bit, actually. Enough so that I took her to see the Marvels. At this moment, that's the only MCU film that they've seen in the theater, my kids. So, you kind of worry about those movies, especially for kids who tend to get scared. But the Marvels was filled with kiddies, and I know plenty of people didn't like it, but my daughter thought it was fun. And so, I think at the end of the day, Jeffrey, isn't that what really matters? Like, the kids had fun at this movie.
Yeah.
People are complaining about the Minecraft movie. I'm like, yeah, okay, but my kids loved it. So,
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with Star Wars, where, it's like people who grew up with Return of the Jedi, and they're upset about the prequels or the sequels, and they're forgetting like that there was a time like when the same reaction was happening to Return of the Jedi. It's like ultimately, like especially doing more books for kids, I've come to appreciate, it's like, yeah, not every Star Wars film has to be for me. Not every X-Men comic has to be for me.
Sure.
There's plenty to go around.
Well, I think Star Wars, there's, I think people will point to some hits and misses, but I think that they figured out a really good dynamic because you have Andor, which just came back, and that is like, okay, that's very adult and cerebral and like, wow, it's about sort of the organization of a rebellion. And they have a show like Skeleton Crew that is literally it's Jude Law and a bunch of kids. And it's like, yeah, this is definitely for kids. And, again, my daughter will watch Young Jedi Adventures, so they're very good at like, well, yeah, not everything is for everybody. I'm sure Disney doesn't want people to market it that way. But I think, because people who hadn't enjoyed Star Wars in decades, when season 1 of Andor was on, they couldn't believe how good it was,
Yeah.
And again, it's like a prequel to a prequel, it's the prequel to Rogue One. And it's like, well, we know where the story is going, but it's still so engaging and so well done. And it goes back to what I've said a few times, Jeffrey. It's like, if you're telling good stories, people are going to be excited about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in terms of the prequels, episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, is coming back into theaters which is shockingly, it's 20th anniversary, which, nothing makes you feel young like finding out that the last prequel was 20 years ago. And, that movie was PG-13. It was a lot more violent, and you have Anakin. You don't see him in the Jedi Temple, but you kind of see that. And I'm like, well, my son's almost 10. I'm going to take him to see it, but I don't know. I wonder sometimes about how ready kids are for these things. But you said it earlier. They're kind of going to let you know whether something is for them. Were you able to get your one son sort of back into Star Wars after showing Force Awakens too early, or did that kind of make it a tough road?
I mean, he's watched, Mandalorian, like, helped with Grogu. But he, it's like his Star Wars it's funny because it's like, there's a lot of Star Wars Lego. There's a lot of like playing with toys of characters that like he has no idea who they are outside of being a toy. And so, yeah, but I still haven't sat down and like gone through like, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi with him. So someday.
Right. Yeah. That was, there's a lot of theories out there on how to do it. And I decided with my kid, I was like, well, they're going to show him A New Hope at this camp. And that's the first one that was made. To me, it's it's your best bet. If they're going to like it, they should watch it. And I took it. The Phantom Menace was back in theaters. It was last year for its 25th anniversary. I'm doing the math now. Anyway, and he was enjoying it, but there's a point in the movie where he's like, Daddy, this is really long. And I'm like, yeah, it is. And unfortunately, like it's about to get really exciting, but they've kind of used up some goodwill. But I don't know. I'm able to kind of appreciate those. I'm not one of the prequel haters. They were not my favorite, but when I watched them again with my son, I'm like, the pod race is really cool. And, Darth Maul with the double lightsaber, you can't beat that,
Yeah. And the build up to Anakin versus Obi, like that scene is just like there was a time where I thought like it would have been better to keep the mystery about the Clone Wars and what really happened. But that scene was like, I think is really great. And
yeah. And I like the way that they're mentioning the Clone Wars. I like the way that they've integrated animated characters to live action, like specifically Ahsoka. And my wife's sister. So my niece's name is Sabine, after the character from the animated series and the live action. And her middle name is Eisley, as in Mos Eisley Cantina. I love Star Wars, but I couldn't go so far as to use Star Wars names on my kids. But I love it. I love when Sabine comes over. It's adorable. Jeffrey, I really appreciate you taking the time. And obviously, the book we've been talking about, first and foremost, people should know about Days of Future Fun, available wherever you get books. And it is fun. And I think that's the key. And I loved getting to see these characters. And you can tell when somebody has a knowledge and appreciation for the same characters we all know and love. Is there anywhere people should look for you? I don't know if you have. You have JeffreyBrownComics.com, correct?
Yep. And then I'm on Instagram at JeffreyBrownRQ. And then in person, I know I'll be at San Diego this summer. Not sure what days and
I will be there the first couple days at San Diego because it's sort of the reverse of what I ran into last year. My son's birthday is July 26th. So I had to go after his birthday last year. Now I'm going Thursday and Friday, and I got to come home Friday night. So we always anchor it around when his birthday is going to be. One year he'd be able to walk that floor, but I think the first con for a kid, Jeffrey, should not be San Diego.
It should not.
It should not. Well, it's been wonderful getting to chat with you, and I look forward to the next project, the Hulk graphic novel you were talking about. You said that'll be out in August, right?
Yep, August 5th.
And what's the title of that?
It's just Hulk Teach.
That's right. You did say that. I like that very much. And I will check the guest list and hopefully see you at San Diego Comic-Con. I appreciate that. And obviously our Marvel Movie Talk audience should know that we will be back next week with plenty of reactions. We'll have multiple episodes reacting to Thunderbolts and getting ready for the rest of the summer. But that is all the time we have for now. As the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior.